Hi, my name's Steffi and I chat to video game developers. On this episode, I speak with Artiom and Scott, game developers of Lil Guardsman. In Lil Guardsman, you play as a 12-year-old girl who is suddenly put in charge of the guard's shed at the castle gate. Now, it's up to you to decide whether elves, goblins, and over 100 other characters should be allowed in. In honor of the game's 1-year anniversary, I wanted to share this awesome interview with you all. In this interview, we discuss why comedy in video games is very difficult. We discuss how the gaming industry is relatively young compared to other entertainment forms. And we discuss how the DNA of video games has not changed, even though the gaming industry has changed. And we discuss much, much more. I hope you enjoy this interview and don't forget to beam me up, crew, and support this channel by hitting the subscribe button and hitting the thumbs up. So, hi Artiom and hi Scott. Thank you so much for joining me today. You guys are calling in from Toronto, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Sunny
nice.
Canada.
I was going to say, snow or sun at the moment?
It's supposed to be sun. We have so little of it that I feel like we should celebrate it, but we have a rare day where it snowed unseasonably. So.
Right on the edge. I'm jinxing us, but we've had our last snow, I think.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay,
that's over
cool.
now.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining me. We have so much to talk about, so I am just going to get straight into it. So before we get into the game development, before we start talking about Lil Guardsman, I want to know a little bit more about you guys. I'm making the assumption that you guys play games and you like playing games. So are you able to share a little bit about how you started getting into gaming, specifically how old you were, what was the first game you played, and how did you get exposed to gaming essentially?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to age myself. I'm an 80s kid. So it was a combination of original Nintendo in my basement playing like Super Mario 1 and Super Mario 3 and Duck Hunt. And then the games that really captured my heart and my imagination were the early LucasArts and Sierra adventure games that came out.
Everyone talks about them. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's a thing.
Yes, everyone says they're probably the best adventure games.
Yes, oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And it was this heyday of these funny, whimsical, charming story games. And I think because of the limitations of computers in the early 90s, there were no bells and whistles, so you had to sort of rely on storytelling and humor. So it was playing those games with my mom, and then when I got a little older, without my mom. That's how those were my first gaming memories.
Yeah.
Perfect. And yourself?
So I'm the same age as Scott, so I'm also that same of that same vintage. So adventure games were a big one. That's actually a big piece that we still cross over on in terms of like a really shared DNA of games that we like. Monkey Island series was one of the ones that we both played a lot, and I'm more on the illustration side, so I'm partial to Monkey Island. I think it was 3 that had the like hand-drawn cartoon graphics. Otherwise, I was a PlayStation kid. That was my first console. There was a game called Siphon Filter that I sort of played in over, I think, 2 days straight, basically. Had a friend with a Nintendo. That was sort of a lot of early memories. I just didn't have one, the 64 or otherwise. But and then kind of got into PC gaming, and that was it for a long time for me. I really played almost everything. They have borrowed games when I was younger, as much as I could support the industry. But PC gaming was sort of where I eventually landed.
Perfect. That's so cool. And can I ask, what are you guys currently playing at the moment?
I mean, when you start making games, your diet for games changes. That's kind of one of the dangers of turning your hobby into your work.
Well, before I let you continue, what does that mean? Like, I want to talk about that. Have you lost the passion for playing games?
No, but I think you have to be very comfortable kind of dissecting the frog. So I think that for me, the concern isn't anymore whether something is gonna, like, I love when something surprises me in a game. I love when something hits me in a different way, but if nothing else, I probably play more now broadly than I used to because I have an excuse to do it. So I've become much more even of a gaming omnivore than I was before.
It's like that scene in The Matrix where Neo starts seeing the Matrix, sees the ones and zeros. Like when I love a game, I don't think like this, but a lot of time when I'm playing games for research, I'm just thinking about like what's behind it, what were the developers thinking, and at my personal worst, I'm picturing the spreadsheet underneath the game, which those we've made those spreadsheets; those exist for every game. For me, Xbox Game Pass has been such a valuable service because there's so many great AAA games, but they also have a good commitment to indies. So, I just try to play every game that comes on Game Pass for about at least an hour each, just to see what's happening.
Yeah, but to answer your question, the last two things I played was. Just like everybody else, I got really obsessed with Balatro, and just kind of as what a fun this space. Like, there's still space to make new genres, which is like not something you get to do with movies or television, which is really cool. And so, like, what a fun remix of like poker and solid, a little bit. And then I just tried Bolt Gun was the other one because I was in a mood to try.
Oh, I haven't heard of it. What's that?
It's like there's like this IP called 40K, which is like.
Warhammer.
Which is like this grim dark future, and it's a retro game a little bit. It has like retro game trapping, so it's a shooter game, but all the graphics are 3D with like a mix of 2D. That's really fun, very punchy, very connected. Like it's kind of you get lost in it. That's one of the ones.
Would you recommend it? Should I add it to the list?
Yeah, it's just on Game Pass right now. If you're into shooters, I think it's quite. Like it's just really nicely done, and it kind of is fun to be in. But that's the most
love
recent one.
Competitive, fast multiplayer shooting. So
this one's more single player focused. We give it a shot. See how you feel about it. I don't know. What are you playing?
I was just going to make a comment about Warhammer as a license being a little bit like gaming for dudes, but games are for everyone, and you might love it. So you should try it out.
Nice. No, I've that's the really cool. No, that's I laugh as well. I giggle about that statement too. But honestly, I'm in the same sentiment of like I want to be exposed to absolutely everything, and I get so entertained by like small little cozy cute games. Then I get like entertained by like horror games. I get entertained by like shooter games. So yeah, but I think I'm kind of, as you can appreciate, I'm experiencing what you guys experience the first time every time you play a new game, whereas I think you don't have that novelty anymore. So I think a lot of people are living through me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. No, that's fair. But again, I think there's the nice thing is like if you can still get lost in it, that's still also really satisfying. And I think every so often I get hit by that and kind of just feel sort of connected to it and can step back, not think about it as a job, think about it as just a entertainment again.
I appreciate that. So, can I ask, I'm also making another assumption. I'm assuming you guys work in the industry. Are you doing this full time? Can you tell me a little bit about your professional background and if you actually work in the industry or if this is a serious side gig?
I'm sad to report it is fully a serious side gig. We're all
no, it's not a side gig.
It's your main gig. It's the full. It's our full commitment. Sorry, it's evening here.
Why is that? Why are you sad? You said I'm sorry to say.
Just because I think like we're all in, and it's like
I love that.
It's a like I think entertainment in general like it switches over all the time, so it's a really like volatility is built into it in a fun way, I think, because like every year people come out with new titles, you make something, it's a hit, people really get into it, and then like it just continues and rolls along. So for us, that's part of the enjoyment of it, but it's hard. It can be kind of challenging, but no, we're both full time. This is our career and our jobs. I'll let Scott talk about it, but just before this, I actually came from tech. So I'd started originally a long time ago as an artist, but I'm an immigrant's kid. And so like the three jobs I was allowed to have was
where are you from? Where's your family from?
From Russia originally. And then we got out a long time ago. Yeah. And then once we got to Canada, like I was allowed to be like a lawyer or an accountant or a doctor. I didn't end up being any of those things.
Game developer.
Yeah, I know. It's still very hard to explain what I do. And so I took a detour into kind of doing startups and a bunch of other stuff. And then when that wrapped up, was very lucky to kind of get into gaming, and Little Guardsman got funded early on with Scott.
And I'll jump in. Like during the pandemic, Artiom and my background is in the arts, in music and theater and like live stuff. So that ground to a halt during the pandemic, and that timed out with Artiom becoming a father, and you wrapped you moved on from your last business, or you sold your startup. Is that so we sort of had occasion to hang out more outside because we weren't allowed to be inside together because of COVID. It was sort of during that period that we decided to make games together. We came up with the idea for Lil Guardsman, and started Hilltop from there.
I love that. So I think that's a perfect segue. Let's get into the game. So to my understanding, this is your first title.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a really loaded question. So it being your first title, did you find it difficult? Did you not find it difficult? And I guess, did you ever anticipate it being the way it actually ended up being, if that makes sense?
I mean, I think we learned that sort of for me, like in the performing arts, there's not one way to do it, and there's not one sort of pathway to success. I think on one hand, it feels like we got lucky, but I think the fact that Artiom and I are both grown-ups and that we've sort of have a career under our belt meant that we were certainly thinking about like the creative piece and the dream for this game that we were making, but we were also thinking like, okay, we do want to get into this industry and get into this business. So I think right off the bat, we were looking out for great creative partners to build out our team with. Our team for Lil Guardsman was 7, plus contractors.
That's big.
Yeah, well,
that's big
for sure. And then we were lucky to work with a publisher that's sadly now defunct, but Versus Evil, who was a great publisher of mainly RPGs.
Nice.
But they took a chance on us and our game, and so I think our experience was pretty charmed because we had great partners, and I think we had a good creative vision going into it. And again, because it's not our first rodeo in general, it's our first game, but it's not our first rodeo. We were really willing to cut things. We were really willing to like keep tweaking and take feedback and sort of adapt as we went. So I think, like, was it hard? Was it easy? I think it went as well as it could have because I think we were realistic and worked our asses off.
Yeah.
And it sounds as though you had that business-minded approach to it as well. You're quite...
You know what? I would almost say it's even more like design, just because, again, on my background, I had done a lot of product design, and Scott had been on the creative side with projects before. So we both had a sense of, like, when you make something... I mean, you should first and foremost make it for yourself, because I think you spend a lot of time with it and you kind of want to. But then the second piece is we were willing and interested in what people had to say about it, even when we were sort of sending out the first version of it. It's still scary. Sorry. It seems like we're incredibly brave. We're not that brave. Like it still was hard to get things in front of people for the first time. There will be things that just don't make sense, or users don't end up using it the way you envision, the way they wanted to. You give them like a glass of water and they like dump it on their head. And at the same time, but that's okay. You kind of just learn from that. So I think that helped a lot with the release. It was, again, I mean, if like there's a developer out there who's kind of thinking about their first title, it will be scary, but I think it also, like, we wanted to make something that we could ship. That was another thing we talked about a lot, which is we wanted to make something that was in scope and size and storytelling and ambition was actually something we could deliver on. And like, we've since kind of grown, and it's a nice education. But I think it was something where we were like, no, we think we could probably do this okay. We could do this pretty well. And then from there, you kind of just, you don't know what you've written until people read it. Like, you hope for the best.
Just to button the question, we were on a call with someone that's she's currently at Ubisoft, but she's sort of given us some coaching advice over the years. Her thing was your goal isn't to make a good game. I mean, yes, of course, your goal is to make a good game, but first and foremost, your goal is to finish, and your goal is to make something that doesn't break. And then like good is like that's secondary. So I think we were just so oriented to like, hey, like as we're figuring this out and as we're planning it, can we actually picture all the steps between here and shipping it?
Yeah, and what's missing? What don't we know? And then kind of going there. So yeah, it was an interesting journey. It was fun for us. It's not a loaded question. It's actually we thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
Good. I love that. And there's a lot of stuff that you just mentioned that I kind of want to unpack and touch on. Just the fact that you mentioned that you got that advice about just finish it. A lot of game devs that I've been speaking to, it's no secret that game development, it's difficult, it's rough, it's a slog. And some of the advice that they share is just keep going. And even if it's not a perfect product, you can start a new one after you finish your first one. So I feel like that will resonate with a lot of game devs.
Well, I'd be curious because I think I think it's actually very common advice you get just as a creator in general. Like, so I'm a visual artist. Scott is a writer and a musician. I don't know if you got that early on. Like as an illustrator, they often will tell you like close the loop on finishing something faster, make it more manageable. Because if you kind of let it get away to a scale that you can't comprehend, the final stage is where a lot of learning kind of blows up suddenly. It's where you're like, oh, right, this thing I was worried about at the beginning, I didn't need to. It's not that big of a deal. And if you don't let yourself kind of close out that loop, you lose a little bit of those learnings. I mean, really brilliant stuff can come from those moments too. Like there's tons of games that like have taken, half a decade and decade in some cases, and they're like masterpieces. But, I think if like we're two certified non-geniuses. So for us, what worked practically was like, yeah, let's have something that we can make with a lot of passion with a great team and finish and like have something we like showing off. And
there's a resisting the urge to edit as you create and just sort of get a critical mass out. Mm-hmm. We label our documents as we're working creatively and not as vomit drafts. Like the idea that you are just
so good.
expelling your first draft and then you finesse and polish. And I think that's a good sort of ethos.
That helps.
What's the funniest draft name that you've come up with? Like, have you got some wild stuff out there?
No, I think we usually we will label all of them vomit draft because I think like the very first one is really hard because you're just like, well, what am I committing to? What is this thing? Projects can like scope can change over time, and it's just like it's okay. Let's just get a first version down of anything,
and it can be terrible. It can be the vomit draft can be terrible.
Yeah, because that's the idea. Because you're gonna make it better in the editing process.
I'm going to start using that like in my work folder, and my boss will be like, what's this vomit draft folder? I'm like, well,
it's in the name. Like,
it's a safe space.
What is it? Like, what else could it possibly be other than terrible? It's like, okay, the pressure's off.
Yeah.
I love that. So how long did it take you guys to finish the game? Mm-hmm. And did you stay within that time frame, I guess?
Yeah, we were both like lucky and good. So it was about an 18-month timeline for development that we had planned out, and then we stuck to that. That was production. As you probably have run into, lots of games have a kind of a cooking period before, which is pre-production.
And that's when we sort of made our pitch deck, and we self-funded a vertical slice or a prototype to sell the game to send to publishers. But once we started production, it was 18 months.
So the game's done and dusted. It's out there for the world to see. I don't generally like to harp on the past much, but I'm just curious that now the game's done, is there one thing you would have changed, or if you could change about the game?
Never been asked this question.
No, that's a great
question.
Really?
Do you want me to take it first?
Yeah, go first.
Let me put some dimensions on this. Are you talking about as we worked on it, would we have done things differently process-wise? Or am I allowed to just wave a magic wand and I'm allowed to change one element in the game?
I was thinking one element of the game.
Oh, it's very easy. The original concept so Scott and I and a developer worked on the original build that we sent out to everybody. We still have the copy. Maybe one day we'll include it as like a playable, complete edition.
You've got to release it. Yes.
I will like Twitter and like the social networks have to drag it out of me first by people. But when we made it, I did all the original illustrations for it, and Scott did all the writing and everything else. Like we split everything up. And there was a day where we were designing the tools, and I drew about a dozen tools that I just thought were interesting and cool and conceptual.
So for those of you listening, the tools that wound up in the game are a metal detector, an X-ray, a truth spray, a bullwhip for some reason, and what am I missing?
What's a bullwhip?
Like Indiana Jones.
Because that was a funny joke. That was all I was thinking at the time. That would be really funny if we had a bullwhip that looked like Indiana Jones.
And a decoder ring.
And a decoder ring.
Yeah.
And
what's a decoder ring?
It's just like a toy decoder ring. It's a great question, Steffi. It was a thing that I just got obsessed about. I found like a bunch online. I looked at it. I drew them.
It's sort of retro 50s sort of futurism.
Is it a weapon?
No. It's
like code cracking. It's like a jewelry you wear. It was a toy that used to come inside cereal boxes.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
to crack codes. And in our game, which is sort of a combination of technology and magic, it's like a magical ring. So if an NPC comes up and has documents with like secrets in them, you choose to use the decoder ring. But we've gotten off track.
You guys are showing your age there because, God forbid, toys in cereal boxes now. All those companies.
The ridiculous thing is, we also lest the audience think we're that old. Like, decoder rings weren't in boxes when we were doing
this. When my dad was a
Cracker Jack thing. It was just we were like in a reference. No, I mean I wouldn't. It'd be fine if it was. It just wasn't. I wasn't drawing on deep impressions. Anyways, the point is, I drew that and I didn't think. And there was like a ray gun that we ended up cutting, but like I didn't think that 170,000 words and 2 years later, all the mechanics of the game would drive through those tools. And I probably just it's not that I don't love our tools. They've been great. And the writing team had a lot of fun with them. But I just maybe would have given you guys a little bit more leeway.
Yeah, it's the game equivalent of you pick a really stupid temporary name for a character, expecting it to change, and it never changes.
Yeah.
So we picked these tools sort of as placeholders, and they're in the game.
Yeah.
And they never change.
I don't know if you want to change anything else, but that's my offer for what I would swap out or just have more fun with.
Mine comes from feedback that we've received. We love streamers, and we love streamers for our game. And so we've had some huge streamers find us, which is great. But our bread and butter is small streamers, which we adore, and we love dropping in on streams and connecting with them. And it's been so much fun. What we've heard is what people could use is a previously on. So if you're only streaming once a week, or if you're streaming if you're playing our game, to drop people in or drop new people in. If we had sort of an optional pop-up that sort of gave a quick recap of everything that's happened so far. Yeah. That's what I'd add.
In the game?
In the game, yes.
Because the game's so long? Or what's the mentality of that?
It's very episodic. So it's broken into 12 levels, which are 12 days. Yeah. Lots happen. So I'm picturing let's say a typical streamer plays levels 1 to 3, and then goes away and plays again the following week with a lot of the same audience, or maybe new audiences picking up. I think as we create imagining streamers playing our game, we'll build in some features to keep them caught up.
Yeah, we had talked about a journal early on that would keep track of, but scope is the enemy sometimes.
So but I'm literally picturing the Netflix last week on blank that could just pop up if you're coming back to it.
That's so interesting in general, because you guys have been playing games much longer than I have, but I just feel I could be wrong, but I do feel as though gaming is quite an innovative space, and it's changing. And since you guys started playing games, it's changed completely. But the fact that you guys are making a game now and considering something like Twitch streamers that maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, you would never have considered that as a game dev. It's insane. So I guess my question is, I'm going off track completely from the game.
Do it.
Is there something in the industry that has completely shocked you, that has changed? From when you started playing to now, for example, the Twitch industry, Discord, I don't know how big the industry is.
Something that when I need to shake us out of when we're getting too intense about something is I try to remind us that on some level we're making toys. We are making something for people to just enjoy and play with. I mean, we're also hopefully making art and moving people, but on some level games are still toys. So I think the outer layer can change and shift, But the DNA of the games we're making and that anyone's making, even something as involved as like Red Dead Redemption 2, which is massive and sprawling and powerful, like the core DNA of Super Mario 1 is still there, and what you're doing is still there. So my answer is no. I feel like there's cool shit happening and it's changing and it's growing, but I think the core thing that we're doing stays the same.
I think on my side, like I think one thing that we thought from the beginning was that the industry is still really young. I think relative to any other form of entertainment, even though it's now by size the most popular entertainment we all consume.
Even film is more than 100 years old.
Right, exactly.
We're 50 years old.
50, like if you're being generous, and like I would sort of put it at about 30 years, which is like an incredibly short amount of time for a medium to evolve. I think the biggest one is that, like a lot of entertainment, we are going through this change where there is like less totally big shared experiences, and there is a lot of like smaller but still then weirdly massively shared experiences. So we are in a world where
elaborate on that.
So like we're in a world,
mean like
well, yeah, so like
I was just gonna say, sorry.
Jump in. Yeah.
I literally was just going to say, like, for example, the movie industry, we used to go and watch like big movies as like a community. Like now we just sit and watch, like half the movies are coming out on Netflix. Is that what you mean?
Well, sort of. But like first off, like we all do this. So we all say like, oh, well, this medium's dead, or like cinema's dead. And then like Dune comes out and we all freak out, or Dune 2 comes out, we all freak out, and we all have like this shared experience. So first off, that's always fun about entertainment in general. That didn't surprise us, but it's been great to see that like, you can like one group will say, oh, this is over, this genre is dead, and then someone comes out with this like amazing thing that everyone goes crazy for. That will, like, as long as I get to work in this industry, as long, hopefully, which is forever, or I'm not immortal, so it's like for the next couple of decades, like that will always be fun for me. But the second piece is like we're living in a world where some people are playing, like 220 million people are playing like Fortnite. And at the same time, we were just at PAX recently, there's like these like intensely large communities of which like Lil Guardsman has benefited from that, where, thousands, tens of thousands, nearing hundreds of thousands of players will pick up something, get really obsessed about it. And if you like step one culture over, the person's like, what game are you talking about? And you're like, wow. And it works, and it's still really fun. And then we're all kind of in this tent of interactive media. So that's been great to see, because I think like we are past that other point where that some people still remember, where it's the equivalent of, they used to say like 70 million people watch like the Seinfeld episode. Like that's done, and not done because we're all still watching television. So it's great. I mean, like that's the volatility of the industry that I really love and enjoy, and just brings me a lot of like excitement to see up close.
I love that. I might be jumping the gun here, but have you guys started working on the next project?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Can you share anything?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't know. We haven't pre-rehearsed it, but I think even when we started Lil Guardsman, something we talked about was we want to be in the games industry. We don't want to be in the Lil Guardsman industry. So from the beginning, we were always thinking like, what do you think is sort of a good next step for our next game and beyond that? And I think there was a point in development towards the end where it really, the game was done except for porting, except for QA, except for final polish. And that's where Artiom and I got to shift gears and start thinking about our next thing, which is a real departure from Lil Guardsman. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we wanted to do with Lil Guardsman was like comedy in games is really difficult. And Lil Guardsman was this expression of, well, how could you do comedy in a really interesting way that still blends?
Why is comedy in games difficult? Why?
Yeah, please. Scott led the writing team, so I think this is your question to answer.
So there's something about interactive that is sort of fundamentally opposed to comedy, because sort of the one of the primary dimensionalities of comedy is timing. So if you hand the player the timing, suddenly you're giving over the control of sort of the phrasing of a joke and the timing of a punchline. So, and I don't think we totally nailed it with Lil Guardsman, but we worked really hard to make sure that if you set up a joke and then you step away to make a ham sandwich and come back 20 minutes later and hear the next line, it's not going to completely kill the joke, but that's the hard.
I just
that's
want
the
you to
hard
know
part.
that stepping away to make a ham sandwich is a joke.
That's a
we
good
probably
joke,
would
yeah.
have made
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Little Guardsman, so it's not far
Yeah,
from what we would do to you.
It was really trying to give the player as much choice as possible, but making sure the pacing of the humor, it wasn't sort of corrupted or wasn't stepped on by the fact that there's one player that's going to rapidly click through things, like may not even read it. There's another one that's reading faster than the VO, so is clicking forward through the voice files, and then the player who we love, that is like delighting in how the comedic actors are speaking the lines.
Yeah.
So
would you say the Little Guardsman is comedic?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I've never. That's so interesting. Yeah.
And
Sorry.
No, it's all good. And that was our goal. And it's been so edifying when in a couple of reviews, folks have said like, "Oh, this is funny," like those classic LucasArts games were, like Day of the Tentacle, Sam and Max, and Monkey Island, which we both love. But yeah, I'd say Lil Guardsman is the cute, fantasy, funny sort of spin and take on Papers, Please, which is not at all funny.
This is going to be really interesting because I have no sense of humor. I don't get sarcasm, and I don't have a good sense of humor. So I'm gonna see if
that makes no sense, because I feel like the Aussie and the New Zealand brand of humor is very similar to the sort of Canadian and British sense of humor.
Yeah,
so yeah,
it is, but I don't have it. I don't have it. Everything goes beyond me.
We'll do a
we'll see.
We'll do a follow up.
So you may find that you're playing a sort of pretty interesting deductive game then, and the humor of it is going to be. I'll be really curious. Actually, I'd love to know.
Yeah, I think, know what happens.
And look, I think to go back to what you asked, which is like, what's our next game? I think the thing that we learned or the thing that we reinforced through Little Guardsman more is that like we like characters and we like story beats, and that kind of is going to be, as long as we can manage it, can be consistent for our games. We may mess with those concepts, we may sort of undermine them a lot, but we always come back to it, I think, because it's a grounding that I think we like for the kind of audience that seems to like our games. But on the second hand, like we wanted to explore something bigger, so we're looking at RPG as a title that we want to play.
Oh, nice! So completely different too.
Oh yeah, and Lil Guardsman is completely non-violent. It's got some mature themes, but it's very like, if Lil Guardsman is our love song to Saturday morning cartoons, the game we're making now, which is an RPG which has combat, but is also like dark and funny, it's our attempt at HBO. It's our attempt at Quentin Tarantino instead of Matt Groening in The Simpsons.
It's really nice to be able to kill characters again. That was really good.
I love it as well. I love combat. So yeah. I'm just curious. You said you loved characters. You said story beats and characters. In Little Guardsman, if you could pick your favorite character aside from the main character, what would it be?
You ruled out my easiest one, because actually, when we started Little Guardsman, Lil is very heavily inspired by my daughter, and so as like a precocious kid, so her
and sorry, I'm going to jump in. And the core relationship in Lil Guardsman is between Lil and her father.
Yeah, and so that was a really big connective tissue. So that I was probably working through something there. But otherwise, if I had to choose, I think Speaking of humor, I'm sorry I have to do this to you. Then, like Senor Capello is this character who is just on the search for a fantastical hat. He had it at one point in his life. I didn't write this character. Our writer Matt, I think, wrote the original draft of him.
One of them did.
Yeah, and so Matt and Jeremy, if you're listening, I'm sorry, whichever one of you, birthed this character. Anyways, and so he like we also like player choice, which is the reason we like RPGs. And so if you don't get him in, you miss out on the fact that he actually shows up in almost every single background image. And you can go talk to him, and he's wearing this hat.
These different hats.
And every time he is deeply dissatisfied by it. Again, this is back to that, I think, creating something that you love. It is a joke that gets me every single time, still has never aged for me. I'm sorry if it doesn't work for anybody else, that's okay. But that's probably my favorite character.
Yeah, it's when you work on something and make something for years. Yeah. It's funny the things that you love at the beginning that you're so sick of by the end, and then it's funny. Yeah. It's funny the things that like you thought would be cut that are there at the end. Yeah. I think my favorite character right now today is Echo the Wanderer, who is a very to look at him as a very sort of standard, straight down the middle Gandalf wizard character. But he's like stoned off of his gourd. He's like really messed up. Oh yeah, he's a stoner wizard that's like half Gandalf and half the lead character from The Big Lebowski.
He's like super baked
the
whole time you're talking about him.
So yeah, I'd say that's the one that made me laugh the last time I looked at the game.
Artem, you've actually mentioned this a couple of times throughout this conversation that I'm going to butcher the words and I'm paraphrasing, but you wanted to make a game that incorporated things that you wanted.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a sense that one of those things is that comedic element, but what are the other things that you actually wanted to see in this game? What are the themes? What are the
we can both talk to that, but I think one piece was, and this is the origination of Lil Guardsman, is that we talked to you about the fact that we wanted to make this game that we could make, and I think what that meant for us, and one of those pieces is like art pipeline can drive a lot of what you end up designing in a game because it has to be visual, and there's all these weird twists we took to like be able to get 100 characters into a game that should by no rights kind of contain as many characters as it does. And then Scott managed to pull off the trick of getting them all fully voiced, which is its own miracle. But the biggest one was that just sort of, we were talking about wanting to do a game set in a single location and then talking about genres that we thought were really interesting, but were kind of underexplored. And Papers, Please was the one that came up. Lucas Pope has like one of these great talents.
I've got to play this game. I've got to play this
should.
Stuff.
If you want to be sad, you should. Because that's very much sort of
if you want to experience elements of Artem's Soviet childhood.
Yeah, a little bit. It definitely touched me that way. But like Lucas has a real genius for, I think, creating different genres. Or taking a lot of weird pieces in genres and kind of mishmashing them. And so we kind of felt like Papers, Please was one of these titles we both played, had this huge audience, huge impact, and then had other games that kind of continue to sort of trickle out that would sort of take their own riff on it. And ours was to do this comedic take on it. So that was a piece that was like Scott and I often talk about this idea of like wanting to take something familiar and then elevate it, which is like a term that I heard from a chef that like, it's this concept of like sort of how you cook for people. To me, that comes back all the time. I think that's one of my favorite modes of creation, which is like, taking something very familiar, finding a way to elevate it, finding a way to, I don't mean that in a high-minded way, I just mean as in like finding a new spin on it, finding a new way that someone says,
something small,
that they recognize. So that for me was kind of a big piece of Lil Guardsman, is wanting to do that, I think. I don't know,
I mean, like we alluded to, we both love these classic adventure games, which is a bit of it's an extremely niche genre as like traditional adventure games. So we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to do a straightforward, just point and click classic adventure game. But we wanted to have that kind of charm, that kind of spirit and vibe, but come up with a puzzle and a game loop that's a little quicker. So there's sort of a light strategy element and a light arcade element in terms of how you're ranked and that you get scored on how you're doing. So, but for me personally, Artem could have said, we're doing this genre, suck it up. It's not what you want to do. And all I would have cared about was like, I want to tell a great story. And I want to bring some folks together to tell a great story.
And that's like a tension we still hold. I think a lot of the time, like I'm slightly more the lead on the mechanical stuff, and I think Scott is slightly more the lead on the storytelling stuff.
But there's a lot of like it's so blurry that I couldn't tell you which of the best story elements were mine or the writers or Artem's. So,
we kind of go back and forth talking about sort of, hey, I want to do this mechanic. I think it'd be really interesting. I think it tickles me in this particular way. I think I'm really connecting with the fun of it. And then, what kind of story do you think you want to tell? And then, where does the story take us? Okay, well, let's go back.
How does that fit?
Change the mechanics. So it's this great balance that's really fun, I think, to continually kind of do this tightrope walk.
Yeah, I completely appreciate that. And I hear a lot of not just artists, but many people in many industries, when they are good at their craft, the ability to tell stories, whether it's like through speeches, through your product, through your brand, whatever it may be. So I think yeah,
And
the
it's
ability to do that well would be successful.
I think just about every studio would probably say, well, story is important. But I think in the indie space, story is very important because, again, when you simplify your building blocks, what are you left with? But like for us, we lead with story, and I feel like a lot of other games that we love lead with mechanics or lead with and again, that's an easier way to get fun. If you can make like jumping and spelunking and fighting fun, then you can add a halfway decent story and you've still got a fun game. Mm-hmm. I think our work, if we're going to lead with story, or if story is going to be co-equal with mechanics, is to make sure that mechanics don't shrink don't buckle under that, and that relationship sort of stays balanced.
Yeah.
But I think Lil Guardsman only works as well as it does because of that tension.
Yeah.
Do you think for the next game, are you keeping your Lil Guardsman community in mind? Do you think they'll enjoy the next game, or do you think?
Ooh, we're still learning what our community is. Yeah. So like one of the ones that I think you'd find interesting is that we had a sense. We have this theory that cozy gaming, or at least I do. I'm sorry, I don't mean to attribute to you, but like
I've heard this. I like it.
Cozy gaming is kind of, it's engaging but not stimulating to the degree that, like, for example, like horror games are really.
I don't think it's meant to be stimulating.
Exactly.
It's meant to be cozy.
Yeah,
like, let's sit in bed.
And I like cozy games. I'm a recovered Stardew Valley addict. I have a lot of things under my belt.
Yes.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So to put Lil Guardsman in a cozy context, again, and with our major reference being Lucas Pope's Papers, Please, which is you're under a time limit and it's tense and it's
not a cozy game.
Anxiety inducing. We wanted it to be cozy. We wanted to reward exploration, and like you can rewind and check things out, and it's not terribly hard. It's not difficult. I mean, you can, if you search for the 4-star answers, it's hard, but we wanted it to be cozy, but not at the expense of stimulation.
Yeah, and so I think that's been an interesting piece, is that like we've been really well embraced by the cozy community, and they recommend our game a lot and seem to connect with it. At least, again, it's not monolithic, so I can't speak for all of them, but it's been taken up by them. But then every so often we'll get sort of someone who says, "Oh wait, but like." And now this conflict in the story is broken out. Yeah. Why'd you do that? And like, we didn't mean to.
So there's a
interesting.
There's a large cozy creator who likes our game a lot and has given us a lot of has boosted the signal and has showcased us a bunch. And she's very like, I like 60% of this game, and then at the 60% mark, the story gets darker and the kingdom is plunged into war, and she's like, at that point, I'm out.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
Which you guys couldn't help yourself, could you? Come on.
No. Well, again, because
some drama in there.
Well, the writers led a lot of the design, and so like you have to have conflict. I mean, it's not even that we had to. It's just it was like the first 1% of the design doc started with the plot outline, which 100%. There's
and at the core is the idea that you are playing as this 12-year-old girl who's put in a position of sort of menial authority, and that your tiny little decisions thrust the kingdom into chaos.
Yeah,
that was always at the heart.
That was always the setup. You have to
give me some chaos. I'm ready.
Yeah, you have to imperil the fabric of the universe a little bit with the story. But we feel like
so is our game cozy? The jury's still out.
Yeah,
but a lot of cozy gamers certainly enjoy our game.
But what does that do to the next audience? I mean, I don't know. Look, I like I said, I think earlier, like I mentioned, I come back to this adage of like, you don't know what you've written until people read it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the great joy of making stuff, is that people will react to it the way they react. I think a subset, maybe the one I would bet on the most, is that comedy is something that also will stick around in our games. Okay. And if they enjoyed the sort of comedic stylings of it, but in a darker tone, I think they'll enjoy it. But, we'll see. It'll be fun. It'll be fun to figure out.
I'm so excited.
I just say that I think we're making games that we'll love. We certainly imagine the players of our games, and we try to imagine sort of player personas, which I feel like Artiom is really good at drilling down with. But we want to make games that are like widely enjoyed and widely accessible, and that don't exclude anybody. And I mean, I do think games are for everyone.
I agree.
But like, we want to make sure that the content that we create resonates with as many people as possible.
Yeah. And I think beyond that, I think that then we don't really tend to ask ourselves I think if we aim to be inclusive with the storytelling, if we aim to be inclusive with the characters, then a lot of it comes down to more like big design choices. Like right now, I think we're both obsessed with the idea of games that you can kind of pick up and enjoy in either small or large increments. Again, speaking maybe as both, as like parents, that's something that resonates. But again, there's the gaming's new, so there's now this like just massive brand new audience that's discovering it and like impacting it and changing it. And so who knows kind of where it goes.
And the level of granularity that we're worried about is just like, is this shit good? And I think people like good shit.
It's a good thing to worry about.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. A lot of times when you're making stuff like
about.
you do get down to the level of like it's like driving feel is sometimes what I talk about, which is like is this feel splashy? So like a lot of it is just moment to moment. Like, is this feeling fun? Oh no, it's not feeling fun. Okay, we got to redesign this.
And Artem, you're a stickler for like, okay, in the first 30 seconds, how do people feel? In the first 3 minutes, how do people feel? In 30 minutes, 3 hours. So it's sort of tracking enjoyment at those increments.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So please finish this sentence. Behind every great video game is...
A small team or bigger team, and then the unofficial support network around those individuals that help developers get over the finish line. When I think about Lil Guardsman, which started as 3 of us, me and Artem and a developer, and then ballooned into our core team is 7. But then I think about the voice cast. I think about the people who did QA, the people who localized the game, the people who ported the game. So like it's when we say our team was small and it was 7, like really like 50 people touched the game. And that doesn't include the spouses, that doesn't include the friends who had to listen to us vent. And so, yeah, I think there's these like concentric circles of support around every game.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Well, it sounds as though, not to get too deep and emotional, but you guys have a really good like support network around you, friends and family.
I think we do, and I like sorry not to be late, but like that was gonna be my answer, which was just that like I think behind every great game is like a team, a great team that like trusts each other. That was something we talked about a lot because as the scale of there's all this debate about sort of what makes for an indie game, which is legitimate and interesting because there's like one person teams making amazing games and there's big teams, and we're not even kind of close to what a big team I think would be considered, or maybe it would be for some. And but we like things that making at the scale of a team that can talk to each other and have a shared sense of what's the goal, what's the vision. When things come up, what's the problem? And then sort of this idea, we always talk about the fact there's no monopoly on like good answers. Yeah. And so, some of the best design choices in the game came from, who knows, it wouldn't have been somebody whose job was to game design or do anything. Like we all kind of contributed to it. So that's always like been such a sweet spot. So I think is the other thing that I would carry through for my entire career is that like, I don't like making things solo. I like making things with people. So that's the fun of it.
So, please finish this sentence. Behind every great game developer is
an unextinguished inner child, and is hopefully someone who is still connected to play and is still connected to imagination. Because I think
that is so cool.
I think when we manage to tap into that, that's when our great ideas come out.
That is absolutely amazing, and I 100% agree